My name is Arthur. I am 35 years old. I'm an ordinary man who wanted simple human happiness, a home, a wife, children. And for a long time, I thought that was exactly what I had. But one day, my life shattered, and I found out that all those years, I had been living a lie. But I didn't break. I didn't immediately start smashing dishes or yelling at the one who betrayed me. I did something different. I waited for my time, and when that moment came, I took everything from her. I married Karina when I was 27, and she was 24. We had been dating for a little over a year before that. She was a simple girl, not from a wealthy family, working in the service industry, but she had a sincere feminine kindness that touched me. I was never a womanizer. I always valued stability over adventures. I wanted comfort, a family warmth. With Karina, I got all that. At least, that's what I thought. We rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. I worked in the construction supply industry. The job was tough. Sometimes I came home late, exhausted, but I knew what I was working for. Karina made our house a home. It was always clean, with a hot dinner waiting for me, and hugs when I returned. She wasn't a career woman, more of a homemaker who created warmth. I appreciated that. I believed we were a team, that we were walking towards a shared dream. Our dream was to have a child. After 3 years of marriage, we decided we were ready. We started trying. The first months were filled with hope, then came disappointment. Karina was upset. I tried to support her. It'll happen, sweetheart. We just need some time. But years went by and nothing changed. We had discussed seeing a doctor more than once, but we always postponed it. Either money was tight, or work got in the way, or some other excuse. Eventually, I accepted our childless life as reality. That was probably one of my biggest mistakes. Just when I had started accepting our life as it was, it happened. One evening, I came home from work. Karina seemed oddly excited. She placed dinner in front of me, but sat across from me, biting her lip as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. "Is something wrong?" I asked. She looked at me and suddenly, tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm pregnant, Arthur." I froze. The first thing I felt was shock. Then that shock turned into a wave of warmth, joy. I jumped up, hugged her, kissed her. I couldn't believe it. "Are you serious? Is this real?" "Yes." I took a test, 2 lines, and the doctor confirmed it. She cried, I cried. We laughed and hugged. It was the happiest day of my life. I was sure it was a miracle. After years of nothing, suddenly, here it was. At the time, I didn't know that it wasn't a miracle. It was the beginning of my hell. Pregnancy changed us. I started caring for Karina even more. I worked harder to save money for the future. She visited baby stores, picked out clothes for the baby, and we planned together how we would set up the nursery. I carried her in my arms. I swore to myself that I would do everything to ensure this child was happy, that they would grow up surrounded by love and comfort. I dreamed of walking in the park together, teaching my son to ride a bike, or holding my daughter's hand as I walked her to school. I saw our future. I saw myself as a father. Those were the best months of my life, and the most deceitful. Karina gave birth to a daughter. I was at the hospital. I held her hand as she gave birth. When I first held that little girl in my arms, my heart burst with love. This was my child, my blood. That's what I thought then. I cried. I was happy. I brought them home, carefully laid the baby in the crib, and that's when I felt it for the first time. Something was wrong. I couldn't understand what exactly, but something inside me stirred. I looked at that tiny baby again and thought, she doesn't look like me. Then I dismissed the thought. What are you talking about, Arthur? This is your daughter. You saw her being born. I pushed those thoughts aside, but they came back. And with each passing day, they grew stronger. I didn't know it then, but I was already standing on the edge of an abyss. And very soon, I would have to learn the truth that would destroy me. The time after my daughter's birth was a strange period for me. On the one hand, I was supposed to feel happy. I had become a father. My family was complete. I watched Karina holding the baby in her arms, rocking her to sleep at night. It should have moved me. But deep down, something was cracking. I tried to suppress it. I told myself it was just stress, fatigue, that all new fathers go through this. But every night, when I looked at my daughter's face, one thought pierced me. She doesn't look like me. At first, I was even angry at myself. What are you making up? I told myself, she's your blood, your child. She's just small. She'll change later. I voiced these thoughts to Karina, casually, as if joking. Hey, don't you think she looks more like you than me? I watched her reaction closely, and I saw something that scared me. Karina froze for a moment. Just a moment, but it was enough. Then she laughed. Arthur, she's just a baby. All babies look like aliens at first, and then they start resembling their parents. She spoke lightly, maybe too lightly, but I had already seen that second of panic, and that was enough for me to lose my peace. In the following weeks, I became more observant. I studied every feature of my daughter's face. Her eyes brown, mine were gray, Karina's green, her hair dark, almost black. Both of us were fair-haired. I tried to find an explanation. Well, maybe someone in the family had dark hair. But the more excuses I looked for, the stronger my anxiety grew. The worst was when we gathered for a small family celebration, our daughter's first month. Our friends and relatives came over, and then it started. Oh, what a cutie. But she doesn't really look like her dad, does she? You'll see. Kids change, but those eyes are definitely not from Dad. Every such phrase was like a blade to my heart. I tried to smile, pretend everything was fine. But when one of my friends, a bit drunk, joked, "Hey, Arthur, maybe you should get a DNA test, huh?" Ha ha. I almost threw my glass at him. Karina laughed tensely along with everyone. But I saw she wasn't relaxed anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to my wife breathe. Only one thought kept running through my mind. What if it's true? What if she's not mine? I got up, went to the living room, took my phone, and started searching everything about paternity tests. I read stories of other men. They were similar to mine. My wife said it was a miracle, but the test showed the child was from someone else. I loved her, but she was carrying another man's baby. I read, feeling the panic inside me growing. I wasn't ready to believe it yet, but I already knew. I had to find out the truth. The next day, I called a laboratory. I asked how to get a test done without my wife knowing. It turned out to be simple. I could take a hair with the root or a cheek swab from the child, and that would be enough. I thanked them and hung up. My hands were shaking. I felt like a traitor. I was about to check on my own wife, but something deep inside whispered to me, "You already know the truth. You just need the paper to accept it." That evening, I waited for Karina to fall asleep. Our daughter was sleeping in the crib nearby. I leaned over her, gently swiped a cotton swab along the inside of her cheek. She didn't even wake up. I wrapped the swab in a sterile packet, hid it in my jacket pocket. I stood by the crib, looking at that little creature, and suddenly it hit me. Tears ran down my cheeks. I cried like a child, silently, so as not to wake anyone. Even then, I understood that she wasn't mine, that I was losing my family, that my life would never be the same again. But I went all the way. The next morning, I took the sample to the lab. "You will get the results in 3 days," they told me. 3 days. 3 days I didn't live. I just existed. I looked at Karina, her smile, her care, the way she fed our daughter. I watched her, and I wanted both to hug her and destroy her. On the 3rd day, They called me. The results are ready. Please come and collect them. I went. They handed me an envelope. I opened it right there in the car. There was a phrase that turned my world upside down. Probability of paternity, 0%. I wanted to scream, but I just sat there, clutching that damn paper. I stared out the window, realizing I was no longer the Arthur I had been yesterday. Something inside me broke, but I made a decision. I won't let this lie take everything from me. I won't just leave. I will punish her. She will lose everything. That day, I thought about revenge for the first time, and I couldn't stop anymore. I came home that same day when I received the DNA test results. On the outside, I was calm. I slid the key into the lock, opened the door, and heard Karina cooking something in the kitchen. The smell of fried potatoes filled the air. Our little daughter was lying in her crib, moving her tiny fingers. I looked at her, and it hit me like a shockwave once again. This is not my child. Those words rang in my head like a curse, over and over again. I could have yelled it out right then. I know everything. I know she's not my daughter. I could have packed my bags and left, but I had already made a different decision. I was no longer the man to be used and discarded. I was a predator now, and I would patiently wait for my prey to fall into the trap. The following days, I played the role of the perfect husband. I bought Karina a new phone, saying it was a gift, a thank you for our daughter. She kissed me happily, but all I thought was, now I'll know your every move. The phone had tracking software installed, sending me all her messages. I started asking more questions. How her day went, who called, who she met. She answered calmly, but I noticed sometimes there was tension in her eyes. I knew she was afraid that the truth might surface one day. And she was right. A week later, one evening, I was sitting in my car after work, scrolling through her messages, and I stumbled upon something that made my throat tighten. I miss you. When can we meet? The sender, Vlad. Our next-door neighbor. The guy I once helped fix his car. We drank beer on the balcony, joked around. I thought he was just an acquaintance. The kind life throws your way because you live next door. But he was screwing my wife. I felt rage rising inside me. My blood pounded in my temples, and my fingers gripped the phone so tightly it seemed like I would crush it. I wanted to rush over right then, break into his apartment, smash his face in, scream that he was a bastard. But I stopped. No, not yet. I would do it so that it hurt not just him. I would make sure Karina would never have a peaceful night again. I would make her regret betraying me every single day. I would make both of them remember this for the rest of their lives. The next few days, I began watching Vlad. I knew when he came home from work, I saw him go for his morning jog. I saw how Karina coincidentally met him near the entrance when she supposedly went out to buy groceries. I noticed how their glances lingered a second longer than necessary for neighbors. I filmed it all on my phone, not to show anyone, not yet. This was my personal archive of hatred. Each video, each photo, was another nail in their coffin. One day, I took the next step. I called a lawyer I knew. I need some advice. Yes, about family law. Something happened, Arthur? Not yet, but I want to be ready. I learned how to file for divorce properly, to ensure Karina would be left with nothing. I found out what could be done to strip her parental rights. Yes, I understood by then the child wasn't mine, but I had grown to love her, and I wouldn't let this woman take her and raise her with that scumbag. Karina suspected nothing. One evening, she sat next to me on the couch. Our daughter was sleeping in the bedroom. We were watching some series, and she rested her head on my shoulder. I could smell her hair, and I felt so disgusted that I almost pushed her away. But I held it together because I already knew this comedy would soon end, and I would be the one to drop the curtain. The next morning, I pretended to forget some documents at home and came back when Karina thought I had already left for work. I stood by the door, listening to her voice inside. Yes, I want to. I can't now. He's home. Of course. I love you. I clenched my fist but kept listening. The day after tomorrow? Okay, at your place. All right, I'll come. I quietly stepped away from the door and left. The day after tomorrow. I already knew when she would fall into my trap. That was the day I started my game. A game in which she had no chance of winning. I knew the date and the time. The day after tomorrow. His apartment. Those two words I heard outside the door became my point of no return. I was no longer just going to watch. I moved into action. The next morning, I did everything to make Karina believe I suspected nothing. I talked as usual. What should I get from the supermarket? How did the baby sleep? Do we have enough diapers? She answered gently with care. I love you, Arthur. I smiled and kissed her, but in my mind, I was already making a plan. I had a friend who worked in security systems. I called him. Listen, I need to set up a hidden camera in a rented apartment so it's not visible. Can you help? He agreed. That evening, I told Karina that on Saturday, I'd be going fishing with friends. She brightened up immediately. Oh, that's great. You'll get some rest. I'll stay home with the little one. We'll go to the park. I almost laughed in her face. Yeah, sounds good, honey. But I thought to myself, you've already decided you'll be in his bed while I'm at the lake? On Friday evening, I picked up a miniature camera from my friend. It works autonomously for 12 hours, he explained. Then just insert the memory card into your computer. I thanked him. At night, when Karina was asleep, I stood in the bathroom, staring at the camera. I held that small device in my hands, and I knew that tomorrow I might see something that would tear me apart from the inside. I knew it would hurt, but even more, I wanted to see her humiliation when I put that footage in front of her. Saturday, I went fishing. In reality, I left home, got into the car, and drove to a neighboring district. I left the car there, called a cab, and returned to our building so she wouldn't notice me. I knew Vlad kept his spare keys in the electrical panel on the landing. I approached his door, looked around. The stairwell was empty. I opened the panel. The keys were there. My hands were trembling. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. I had been there many times, at his housewarming, barbecues. But now it was different. This was the arena of their betrayal. Here, she undressed, laughed, whispered to him what she used to say only to me. I quickly scanned the room. The best spot? On the bookshelf, facing the bed. I secured the camera, turned on the recording, checked everything once more, left, locked the door, and put the keys back in the panel. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like the neighbors could hear it. But I did it. The trap was set. I got back into the car, drove to another district, and actually went to the lake. I sat with friends, drank beer, listened to their chatter about work, women, soccer. But every 5 minutes, I checked my phone. I was waiting for Karina to text me something like, "How's the catch?" or "We're in the park." And she did. Caught anything? Came at 14:37. I pictured her typing that, sitting on Vlad's couch, maybe even in his t-shirt, maybe right after he had just wiped sweat off his forehead. I replied, "Not yet, but the day is long." And I thought, your day is long too, and it's your last peaceful day. That evening I came home. Karina greeted me with a smile. "How was your day?" "Great. And yours?" "Oh." We walked with the baby, played. I listened to her and saw how confident she was that everything was under control. But she didn't know she had already lost. The next morning, I said I was going to buy some tools. I went to Vlad's apartment, opened the door, went in, took the camera, and removed the memory card. Locked up, put the keys back. My heart was pounding. My hands were sweating. I got into the car, inserted the card into my laptop, pressed play. The first few minutes, silence and empty room. Then the door opened. Karina walked in, followed by Vlad. They were laughing. He kissed her neck. She hugged him. 10 minutes later, they were on the bed. I watched my wife moaning under another man. I saw her kiss him the way she used to kiss me. I felt nothing. I had turned to ice. I only thought, that's it. Now you're mine, and I will destroy you. I copied the video onto a flash drive, put it in my pocket. That evening, while Karina talked again about diapers and baby food, I looked at her and smiled. But there was no warmth in my smile anymore. I was just waiting for the moment to reveal my hand, and that moment was already approaching. I didn't sleep the whole night before delivering my first blow. I lay beside Karina, listening to her steady breathing, watching as she hugged little Sophie in her sleep. It was the last time I saw them like that, together, in my home. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning started as usual. Coffee, toasted bread, omelet. Karina cheerfully told me how the baby woke up at night and how she lulled her back to sleep. I nodded, smiled. In the pocket of my jeans was the flash drive with the video recording. Today was the day I would throw this woman out of my life. After breakfast, I asked her to sit at the table. Karina, we need to talk. She tensed up. Did something happen? I silently pulled out the flash drive and plugged it into the laptop. Watch this. What is it? Just watch. I pressed play. She froze when she saw herself on the screen. At first, she tried to keep her composure, but when Vlad began undressing her, and she laughed and whispered something into his ear, Karina turned pale. Her breath quickened. Her hand covered her mouth. Arthur, this isn't what you think. I snapped the laptop shut. It's exactly what I think. She started mumbling, trying to explain herself. It was a mistake. I love you. I wasn't listening. Listen to me. My voice was cold like a blade. I know everything. I know the child isn't mine. I did a DNA test. Her head shot up. What? A test. 0% Karina. She's not my daughter. She burst into tears. Arthur, I didn't mean. It just happened. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out into the yard, at people rushing about their business, as if nothing had happened. But my world had collapsed. Yet, I wasn't crying anymore. I had turned to stone. Listen to me carefully. I turned to her. We're getting a divorce. You'll leave this place, and you'll leave the child with me. What? She wiped her tears. No, she's my daughter, not yours. You and Vlad made this child, but he doesn't want her. He won't leave his wife. And I love this girl, no matter what. She was silent. I saw fear in her eyes. She already understood that she had lost. The next few hours were hell. She begged, screamed, cursed me. I made a mistake. Why are you destroying everything? We can start over. I silently went to the room and packed her things. I threw her suitcase into the hallway. Get out. Arthur, you can't. This is our home. No, it's my home. Nothing is registered to you. She grabbed Sophie in her arms. I'll take my baby. I stepped up close, looking straight into her eyes. Try me. 2 hours later, Karina was sitting on a bench near the entrance. I peeked out the window. She was crying, but I didn't care. I watched the woman who ruined my life sit there with her suitcase, with no plan, no home. And for the first time in weeks, I felt relief. Later, I found out she went to Vlad's place. He opened the door for her, but she didn't stay long. His wife quickly found out everything, and Karina ended up at her mother's place, in a cramped 2-room apartment with no money, without her child. And I was holding Sophie in my arms. She laughed, reaching out her tiny hands toward my face. I didn't know what the future held. I just knew that I had won the first battle, and there was more to come. Karina didn't know that this was only the beginning. I was going to make sure she would never be able to lift her head again. After I kicked Karina out, I could have stopped. I could have just divorced her, split the property, left her some scraps. But I didn't want that. I no longer saw the woman I loved. Before me was a liar, a traitor, someone who used me like a doormat. I wanted her to remember this lesson for the rest of her life. That every day, waking up in an empty room, she would remember me and realize I took everything from her. I started the very next day. I called my lawyer friend, Oleg. Hi, it's time. Let's start the divorce. Got it. You want to keep the apartment? Not just the apartment. I want her to get nothing. And I want the child to stay with me. Oleg sighed. Well, it won't be easy, but it's possible. Do you have any proof of her immoral behavior? I smiled. More than enough. Video, messages, DNA test results. Oh, then we'll get it done. The following weeks were spent on legal preparation. I gathered a full dossier on Karina. All her texts with Vlad, where she described what he was like in bed while I was at work. The video recording of their meeting. DNA test results confirming I wasn't the child's father. Witness statements from neighbors who saw her going to Vlad's place every day while I was at work. Oleg said that this amount of evidence was enough not only to keep the apartment, but also to strip her of any rights to the child. She won't get anything. You won't even pay child support. It's not your child. Those words cut like a knife. I loved Sophie, but I understood, legally, I was nothing to her. And if I lost, I could lose her forever. I couldn't afford to lose. Karina called me a few times. Arthur, let's talk. We can solve this peacefully. I replied coldly. I'm solving it. Through court. But it's cruel. I'm the child's mother. I have the right to see her. She's not mine. And you know that. I made a mistake. But you can't do this to me. I can. I hung up. Her tears no longer moved me. The court hearing was scheduled a month later. Karina came in a worn-out dress, dark circles under her eyes. Beside her was her mother, whispering something to her. I was in a suit, confident, calm. My lawyer was by my side. I noticed how Karina nervously glanced at me. She still hoped I would relent, but I didn't even look at her. Oleg spoke first. Your Honor, my client Arthur has undeniable evidence of the defendant Karina's adultery, as well as DNA test results confirming he is not the biological father of the child. We request that he be relieved of parental obligations, retain ownership of the apartment, and deny the defendant any claims to property. Karina turned pale. She didn't expect me to go this far. Her lawyer mumbled something about the emotional state of a young mother and a chance for reconciliation. But when I handed the judge the flash drive with the video, followed by the test results, everything was decided. The judge looked at Karina. Ma'am, do you have anything to say? She began to cry. I'm sorry. I don't want to lose my child. She's my daughter. I beg you. The judge sighed. You made a serious mistake. The court rules. The marriage is dissolved. The plaintiff's demands are fully satisfied. The property remains with Arthur. The plaintiff is recognized as not being the father and is relieved of parental obligations. Karina jumped up. But I want to see my daughter. This is cruel. The judge looked at her. That is beyond our jurisdiction. I left the courtroom as the victor. Karina stood in the corridor, tear-stained, broken, leaning against her mother. She looked at me. You took everything from me. How could you? I calmly replied, you did it yourself. And I walked away. That evening, I sat at home, holding Sophie in my arms. I knew I wouldn't have to pay child support. I could have legally abandoned this child, but I couldn't. I already loved her, and I decided that, despite everything, I would be her father, not biologically, but truly. I looked at her as she slept, and I knew I had won. I took everything from Karina, but I kept the most precious thing. I thought that after the court, everything would be over, that Karina would understand her time was up, that she would accept defeat. But but I underestimated her. When a woman loses everything, she becomes dangerous, and she didn't know how to stop. 3 days passed after the court ruling. I was returning from the store, bought baby food, diapers, a few things for myself. I opened the entrance door and saw her. Karina was standing by the stairs, clutching a small bag to her chest. When she saw me, she immediately stepped forward. "Arthur, hi." I silently walked past her. "Wait, please." I stopped, looked at her. Before me was a completely different woman from the one I once loved. Thin, red eyes from constant crying, hair messily tied back. "What are you doing here?" I asked coldly. "I just wanted to bring some things for Sophie. Here, a jumpsuit, a little hat." I knitted them myself. I looked at her hands. It was clear the items were handmade. "No need," I answered sharply. "Please, Arthur. I just want to see my daughter. She's mine." I felt a wave of rage rising inside me. "Yours?" I stepped forward. "Yours? Do you remember how you were moaning in Vlad's apartment while I was at work?" She flinched. "I understand everything. I was stupid. I'm sorry." Too late. I turned and went to my apartment. She stayed there, clutching those baby clothes. But that was just the beginning. The next day, she was near the entrance again. "Arthur, I'm sorry about last time. I just want to talk." I didn't listen. 2 days later, she was standing under the windows, looking up as if hoping to see Sophie. I closed the curtains. Once, she tried to enter when I was taking out the trash. "Can I just see her? For a minute. I won't ask for anything, just to hold her. I'm her mother." I couldn't take it anymore. "You're no one. Do you get it? No one. And if I see you here again, I'll call the police." She started crying. "I love her. She's my child." "That didn't stop you from sleeping with Vlad while she was inside you." I walked away, but the worst was still to come. One evening, my mother-in-law called me. "Arthur, sorry to bother you, but Karina looks terrible. She's not eating, constantly crying. She even talked about suicide. And what do you want me to do?" "I don't know. Maybe let her see Sophie sometimes." "No, but she's a mother. She's a cheater." I hung up. I knew these calls would be hard to hear, but I also knew as soon as I showed weakness, she would come back into my life. And I couldn't let that happen. A week later, she switched to threats. "If you don't let me see my daughter, I'll go to the police." "And what will you say? That you left someone else's child with another man? And that he's raising her better than you? I'll do whatever it takes to get her back." Try. I hung up. I wasn't afraid anymore. I could see right through her. And I knew she was just looking for a way in. But the door to our life was closed. Forever. Then Vlad called me. "Listen, Arthur, maybe we can settle this peacefully. She's losing her mind. I get that you're angry. But the kid, you?" I laughed into the phone. "You're a peacemaker now? You, who was screwing my wife while I was working. I understand. I'm guilty. But go to hell, Vlad." I turned off the phone. A few more weeks passed. Karina disappeared. I didn't see her near the building anymore. She didn't call, didn't text. Her mother only answered briefly once. She moved to another city, found a job, said she wants to start fresh. I didn't care. I was holding Sophie, and I knew I had won. I didn't just kick Karina out. I erased her from my life so that she would never come back. And I no longer felt pain. I felt peace. Time is a strange thing. Just a few months ago, I couldn't imagine my life without Karina. I thought she was my other half, that we would grow old together. But now, I would wake up in the morning, listen to little Sophie breathing softly in her room, brew my coffee and feel freedom. Yes, I was left alone with a baby in my arms, without support, without the woman who had once been by my side. But I was no longer that deceived fool. I had won, and I started building my new life. I switched to remote work. No more rushing to construction sites or warehouses. I worked from home, handling orders, logistics, sitting at my laptop. That gave me time to be with Sophie. I changed her diapers myself, fed her from a bottle, rocked her at night when she cried. At first, it was hard. I didn't know how to do it right. Sometimes, I sat on the kitchen floor, holding her in my arms, crying from exhaustion. But then it got easier. I felt, for the first time in my life, that I didn't depend on anyone. I was creating my own world. Karina no longer appeared. I sometimes thought of her, but without anger. More like a bad, dirty dream that left scars on me. I knew I could never forgive her, but I stopped dwelling on it. I had other concerns. One morning, I took Sophie for a walk in the park. It was summer, sunny, greenery all around, fresh air. She was sitting in her stroller, laughing as the breeze tickled her cheeks. "What a beauty you have." Suddenly, I heard a cheerful woman's voice. I looked up. A young woman stood before me, also with a stroller. Light hair, brown eyes, a simple dress. "Thank you," I mumbled. I hadn't talked to women like this in a long time. "I'm Marina, and this is my Kaida. He's 8 months old. Your little one is about the same age?" "Yes. Sophie is 7 months." We talked for about 15 minutes. About kids, sleep, baby food. I didn't even notice how she made me smile. I felt something I hadn't in a long time. I felt alive. We started meeting in the park often. Marina was also alone. Her husband left her during pregnancy. I didn't tell her my story. I just said I was divorced. I didn't want to dig up the past. I simply enjoyed those walks. That ease. And when one day she touched my shoulder, I realized I wanted to kiss her. It was so simple, yet so important. I felt I could love again. Months passed. Marina became part of our lives. Sophie laughed when we had lunch together. She called Marina auntie and my Kaida my friend, and I thought, maybe this is real happiness. Not loud words about eternal love, but just two people who went through pain, betrayal, losses. And now they hold on to each other because they know the value of this peace. One day, I accidentally met Vlad. He was walking with his wife, the one he didn't leave for Karina. He saw me. Our eyes met. He looked down and walked past. I smiled. That was a quiet victory. I saw Karina only once, in a shopping mall. She was working as a cashier. Thinner, exhausted, her face aged. I approached, bought a bottle of water. She looked up, met my eyes. I said nothing. I just paid and left, and she understood. I had won. I took everything from her, and I would never return to her life. That evening, I sat in the kitchen. Marina was making tea nearby. Our children were sleeping in the next room. I looked out the window and realized, yes, the scars would remain. I would never forget that betrayal. But I no longer lived in the past. I had a future, and this time a real one. 3 years had passed. Sometimes, I would wake up at night, stare at the ceiling, and remember everything I had been through. The betrayal, the DNA test, the court, Karina's sobs in the corridor. It all seemed distant now, like it was from another life. But I knew those events had left a permanent mark on me. I was no longer the naive man who once dreamed of a perfect family. I had become different, stronger, harsher, more cautious. I had won that war, but the war had left its scars. Sophie was already 3.5. She ran around the apartment, laughing, hugging me, calling me Dad. To her, I was a father, the only one she knew. She didn't remember Karina. Sometimes I would look at her and wonder, did I do the right thing by taking her mother away? But then I would remind myself, that was not just a mother. That was a woman who had betrayed her child even while carrying her under her heart. She betrayed me, and she betrayed this little girl too. And I understood, yes, I did the right thing. I gave Sophie a chance to grow up in love and peace. Without lies, without pain, my life had become quiet. I worked, raised my daughter, and dated Marina. We didn't rush. I hadn't proposed, and we hadn't moved in together. I simply enjoyed this new life. I appreciated the simple stability I had longed for, but the past came knocking. One evening, I was coming home from work. Karina was standing near the entrance. I hadn't seen her for over a year. She had changed. Thinner, older, empty eyes. I stopped. "What do you want?" She raised her head. "I want to talk." "We have nothing to talk about." "Please, Arthur. It's important." I sighed. "Fine. 5 minutes." We sat on a bench near the building. Karina was silent for a long time. I waited. I want to ask for forgiveness." I laughed. "Forgiveness? After 3 years? I understand that I ruined everything. I realize it all. But I was stupid back then. I lost everything. And I know it's fair." I said nothing. "I'm not asking you to take me back. And I'm not asking to see Sophie. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." She started crying. I looked at her and felt nothing. No hatred, no pity, just emptiness. "I forgave you a long time ago, Karina, but that changes nothing. You are no longer part of my life." She nodded. "I understand." We sat in silence for a little while longer. Then she stood up. "Be happy, Arthur. You too." She left. I never saw her again. That evening, I sat on the balcony, drinking tea, thinking about how strange life had turned out. Once, I thought revenge would bring me satisfaction. But, in truth, I had simply put an end to it all. I had become who I was before all this, a simple man who just wanted to live peacefully. And now I knew for sure. I had won not because I destroyed her. I had won because I no longer let her affect me. I was free, and that was my true victory. In the nursery, Sophie was breathing softly. I went to her, adjusted her blanket. She opened her eyes, sleepily whispered, "Daddy, I'm here, baby. I love you. I love you too, sunshine." I sat beside her, ran my hand through her hair, and for the first time in many years, I felt complete peace. My life was finally what I had always wanted it to be, pure, without lies. I no longer looked back, because ahead of me was a future, a real one. Several more years had passed. Sophie was already 6. She was getting ready for school. I stood in the hallway, tying her shoelaces as she laughed, fidgeting, unable to sit still. "Daddy, will I have the best backpack?" "Of course, sweetheart." "And a unicorn pencil case?" "A pencil case, a unicorn, and even a magic wand if you need one." She hugged me around the neck, and I felt my heart fill with warmth. I was happy, truly, quietly happy, without pretense, without lies. I hadn't thought about Karina in a long time. She had vanished from my life like a bad dream. I had everything I needed. I married Marina. We didn't throw a big wedding, just signed the papers and invited a few close friends. I didn't want to put my life on display anymore. I had become quieter, more cautious. I was no longer that naive Arthur who once believed in eternal love. Now I knew. Happiness is silence. It's having someone beside you whom you can trust. And it's children running around the apartment laughing. My Kaida, Marina's son, already called me Dad. I never tried to replace his father, but we had grown close. And Sophie called Marina Mom. It happened naturally. Are you okay with that? Marina once asked when Sophie first called her that. If that's how she feels, I'm only happy. I saw how Marina loved my daughter, how she cared for her, and I realized this was what I had always dreamed of, a real family. But one event reminded me that the past doesn't always let go so easily. One day, I received a letter, a plain white envelope in the mailbox. I opened it and saw handwritten text. I immediately recognized the handwriting. Karina, hello, Artur. I don't know if you even want to read this. I just wanted to say that I often think about you, about our daughter. I understand that it's my fault. I lost everything, and I accept that. I live in a small town. I work at a pharmacy. I have a husband, but we are more like neighbors. I don't love him, and he doesn't love me either. It's just life. But every day, I think about Sophie. I want so badly to see her. I understand that I have no right. I just wanted to ask you, at least one photo, so I know what she looks like. If not, I'll understand. Be happy. Karina, I read the letter several times, and I sat for a long time staring at it. I could have answered. I could have sent her a photo. I could have made a gesture, shown that I had forgiven her. But I did nothing. I simply tore the letter into small pieces and threw it in the trash. Not because I still hated her, just I had long moved past it. She was no longer part of my life. Karina was the past, and I was living for my future. That evening, I sat on the balcony. Marina was putting the kids to bed. I opened a beer, looked out at the evening city. I remembered everything I had been through, the betrayal, the DNA test, the court. I remembered how I broke, how I hated, how I dreamed of revenge. And then I realized true revenge was something else. I was alive. I was happy. I had a family, love, and respect. And Karina was writing letters, sitting in a gray little apartment, next to a man she didn't love. That was my victory. Not loud, quiet, real. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply free. And that was the best thing I could have gotten. I took a sip of beer, smiled to myself, and heard Sophie's laughter from the apartment. I got up and went to them, to my own, to those who were truly my family. Karina's story was over, forever. Please subscribe to our channel Stellar Stories. We have new amazing stories coming out every day. Thank you.